There's a lot of people that use mid-range as sort of their, okay, which gun am I going to use? Um, some guys will do a seating depth changes between match one, match two, match three, or tuner changes, or they'll bring two or three different loads with them. I fly pretty lean, so because I fly, um, I have to be very conscious of weight, and so I have to be very confident in what I take. Um, I know guys who drive who will bring 1,000 rounds or 1,500 rounds with them because they'll have 500. They'll bring enough so that they could shoot the entire match with, one block of ammo. So that means bringing three blocks of ammo. And so it might be three different powder charges. It might be same powder charge, but some different bullets. It could be a bunch of different things. People that drive have that advantage. They have that luxury of bringing multiple guns, multiple loads. I know guys that'll bring two or three guns and like I said, 1,000 or more rounds of ammo, and they'll spend mid range kind of flushing out what's working and what's not. Keep in mind with the way F class works, as long as you are in sighters, you're allowed to switch your guns out. Once you start for record, you're not allowed to change your gun unless there's an actual mechanical failure that's been approved by the referee. But while you're in sighters, you're allowed to change guns. So there's guys like every match, there's always, plenty of people that I see on the first match of the day where there's unlimited sighters and you have 30 minutes, they'll get down there with one gun, they'll spend 10 minutes shooting it, they'll put it away, they'll bring out the next gun, they'll shoot it for 10 minutes. Maybe they'll try a couple different loads while they're doing that. Like I've seen some stuff like that. I typically for like nationals where it's an actual 3-day mid range, 2 days of team and 3 days of long range. That's 8 days of shooting. I'll typically fly with two guns. Southwest Nationals, because it's only 1 day mid range, um, and basically 4 days of long range. I'm only taking one gun with me, so I have very high confidence in the gun. But you never know. But to be honest, I can't afford to be. It costs an extra $100 per gun each way, and I'm just not going to spend the extra couple $100. You know, uh, for a match that size compared to nationals where you've got extra days and a lot more shooting involved. Couple hundred more rounds worth of shooting. So um, anyway, all right.
Wonderful.
Can you talk about rear bag fill material and how to properly tune the bag with fill? So I think I've always told you guys, and if I haven't, just keep in mind everything I do locally for my local matches is in preparation for travel matches, and that means weight conservation. So for me, let me pull out my rear bag here. But this is my rear bag right here. So um, it only weighs I don't know what it weighs these days. Let's take a look. I've added a little bit to it. So it's probably 10 or 11 pounds. Let me see here. So oh no, I forgot. I did take some stuff out of it. So my rear bag only weighs 7 pounds. Oh, somebody needs in. Okay. So my rear bag weighs 7 pounds. My other one weighs a little bit more. So this is very light because I use plastic fill. I use Spexlite in here, Spexlite, and they sell, I don't know, 5, 6, 8 different sizes of plastic beads, and they do kind of cater to the shooting industry as well. So they've got plastic sand, they've got really tiny, like 1 millimeter, 2 millimeter, 3 millimeter beads, and I have a combination of that in here. So it's very light but very stable. And then my ears are actually walnut media. And again, they have to be deformable. It has to be compressible. So you can't fill it with like concrete. Um, but I'm really happy with it. You do have to make sure though, with rear bags, these are leather stretches. So there's a lot of times where I'll see guys, they get a new bag, it's all nice and tight, and they get everything going. And then maybe 6 months to a year, they're like, man, my groups are opening up. I keep throwing flyers. And the first thing I'll tell people is check your bag, make sure it doesn't need more fill. Like, see how this has like a little bit, like I need to probably put a little bit in again. Like I always check it before big matches, but I need to probably fill it just a little bit. It's just got a little bit of pucker to it. That should be just a little stiffer. And then making sure that my ears have, enough in. so that it's holding it stable and not, you don't want it to be, wiggling around. So that's kind of what's important to me in a rear bag. I've shot off 23-pound, my old Seb Bigfoot was like 23 something pounds. I had it completely full of heavy sand. I mean, the thing was an anchor. I mean, just it weighed more than my Seb. And yeah, that is fantastic to shoot off of. I'm not going to deny it. It's also not a lot of fun to try to fly around the country. So I do make the compromise for weight, but I'm very confident shooting off it. But I will say it takes time getting used to shooting off a really light rear rest, because you're always going to be able to move it a little bit more, whether it's your shoulder or your arm or whatever it is. You have to be more careful rather than having like just a really, really heavy bag back there. Yeah. So I order my springs directly from Defiance. So I usually order like 8 or 10 of them at a time, and they're all just stock 24s. I've tried the Wolf Extra Powers, and they're fine too. Like, I mean, you just have to tune differently. Like if I was to throw a 28 in my gun would be totally different.
Really?
It'll affect. Oh yeah, it'll definitely affect ignition for sure. Yeah, yeah. You'd have to tweak your load for it. It'll. I will say, of all the things I've learned over the years, the effect that ignition has on your accuracy is the one thing that I never would have expected to have such an effect. Having a clean bolt, having a clean firing pin hole, having no drag on the bolt, on the firing pin assembly. Like, ignition is so underrated by most shooters. Changing your spring, all these things. Like I was I'll give you a perfect example. I was at the range the other day, and I'm just at the 100-yard range, and it's just me and one other guy, and he's about 6 benches down, and I'm shooting and he's shooting, and we happen to go out to check our targets at the same time, and he knew he knew I ran the 600-yard club there, so we're talking a little bit, and I walk over to his target, and literally our targets are 2 feet tall and 4 feet wide at the 100-yard range, and he had four targets, and he goes, yeah, my dad asked me to sight in this gun for him, and it's like some 60-year-old Remington, and some loophole 4-power scope on it and this and that. And he goes, I just can't get it to shoot. He goes, I went and bought brand new Federal and Sierra, like all these different brands, Nosler ammo. And literally every group was like 10 to 12 inches with a 5-shot group. So, I mean, a 5-shot group and a 5-shot group. He had one that was the entire 2 feet. It was on to the next target. It was so bad. He goes, I just don't know what the heck's going on with the gun. Maybe it's rusty. Maybe it's this and that. I said, when's the last time you cleaned the bolt? He goes, I don't know. He goes, but I don't have any tools. And I said, well, look, when we go back to the firing line, I'll help you. So we get back to the firing line. I pull out my toolkit, pull out his bolt. I open it up. It's a Remington. We pull it out, take a rag. We wipe it down. It was just full of crap inside there. We just wipe it down, clean the firing pin. We ran I've got a bore mop. We clean out the inside of the bolt, clean his firing pin hole, wipe it down, put a little bit of oil on it, throw it back together. And the same exact ammo went to 4 inches. Like, and he's like, holy crap. He goes, I never would have expected my problem was in the bolt. He goes, you just always assume it's the crown or the lands or rust somewhere. And I'm like, you can't underestimate what your bolt is doing to your accuracy. So, and he proceeded to shoot some better groups after that. And that was shooting off. He was just shooting off literally a sandbag and a jacket. So, it probably would have been better off like a better rest or something. But so if the donut's on the inside and you're loading above the donut, nobody gives a rat's ass, right? But when you're running a mandrel through it before you load, right? So you're running, this is hard to do, but you get the idea. If you're running a mandrel in, then what happens is you're actually pushing the donuts to the outside, right? Right. So now you can seat the bullet wherever you want for the most part in here, because the donut's been pushed to the outside. Now, this is where a lot of people will tell you, well, run a mandrel or a gauge pin, push the donut out, and then that's where you would turn it off, right? Because when you turn, you're taking a little bit down on the shoulder. So all of this gets turned off and the donut disappears, right? The thing to keep in mind is that if you have really big donuts, so 5, 6, 7, 10 firings on something that forms really big donuts, that's a lot of metal, believe it or not, like a pretty good chunk. And when you run a mandrel, you're pushing a pretty good chunk out here. So yeah, that's fine, except if this donut on the outside is too big now, it'll actually affect your ability to chamber and you'll get a hard chamber. So here's how you can tell that's happening. Let's say you fire your brass a couple times and you go and you're like, okay, great. I know it's fire formed. I know it's great. And you get your, you get your comparator and you put your brass in there and you zero it out and you put it in your sizing die and you size it. And then you measure it and it says 2 thousandths bump and you're like, awesome. And then you take your chamber, your bolt, your gun, and you take the firing pin assembly out and you put a piece of brass in and your bolt falls and you're like, oh, this is awesome, right? 2 thousandths bump, my bolt falls great. And then you finish the rest of your loading and your mandrel goes through and you've pushed the donut out unknowingly or, like haphazardly, and you seat your bullets and then you get to the match or the range or whatever, and you put that round in and suddenly it doesn't want to close. It's like a little bit tight. Well, that's because your donut is now affecting its ability to go all the way into the chamber right at the shoulder neck junction. Does that make sense? So that's really where the bigger question is about this. So some guys will just run a mandrel like honestly, I just run my mandrel like 2/3 of the way down the neck.
Yeah.
So I don't. He's an incredible shooter, an incredible wind caller, and
Right.
you can buy back a lot of points when you have those skills. Like I for all intents and purposes, I am probably a better reloader than I am a shooter. I have to overcome some of my wind calling deficiencies by shooting a tighter gun. And I know guys who can shoot a taller gun and still kick my ass because they're better wind callers. So, I have to do the best I can to shrink. Like I'm a good wind caller. I'm not a great wind caller. So, I have to compensate. So yes, I'm sure a 0.6 gun, if you make perfect wind calls every time, of course, 6 inches in a 10-inch circle every time is going to hit and you're going to shoot cleans. Like, yeah, I mean, but the further out you get on that 10 ring, suddenly, win.
Bam.
You just wouldn't want to knowingly go to a match with a 0.6 gun. I mean, unless you're going to make every call perfect.